Julia froze as the wind roared and the grass behind her house trembled. Marine One was landing right there in her backyard. At first, she thought it was a mistake, until the door opened and a man in uniform stepped out. Just 3 weeks ago, she had quietly given up her first-class seat to a scarred, silent soldier on a crowded flight. She thought no one noticed, but someone had, and what happened next would turn her quiet life upside down. Hey everyone, welcome to Legacy Tales. Let's get started. The rain hadn't let up that morning when Julia arrived at the airport. She was exhausted. 3 months of double shifts at the hospital had finally earned her a reward, a first-class seat on her trip to see her sister after years apart. But just as she was about to board, she saw him. A man, barely older than her, with burn scars crawling up the side of his neck, a walking cane in one hand, and an economy ticket clutched in the other. He didn't speak, didn't make eye contact, just waited quietly as others passed him without a second look. Julia tried to ignore the knot forming in her chest. It was her moment, her treat, but something inside her shifted. "Excuse me," she said softly to the flight attendant. "Can I switch seats with him?" The woman blinked, surprised. "Ma'am, you don't have to." "I want to." Minutes later, the soldier was seated in 1A, confused and humbled, while Julia squeezed into 42F between a man with loud headphones and a crying baby. She didn't even tell the soldier her name. She just smiled and said, "Enjoy your flight." She thought that was the end of it. But deep down, something had changed. She didn't realize it yet, but someone important had seen everything. 3 weeks later, Julia was making tea when the ground began to rumble. At first, she thought it was a low-flying plane. But then the rumble grew louder, and when she stepped outside, her breath caught. The presidential helicopter, Marine One, was descending behind her modest backyard. Her neighbors peeked out from windows. Children stopped in the street. And Julia stood frozen, holding a dish towel, completely unaware that her life was about to shift in ways she couldn't have imagined. 2 men in suits approached her front door. "Miss Julia Carter?" one asked, showing his badge. "We're here on behalf of the President of the United States." She laughed awkwardly. "Is this a joke?" "It's not. The President would like a word. Right now." Before she could process it, she was being guided into the helicopter. The inside smelled like polished leather and fresh paper. She sat nervously across from a tall man in full military uniform, General Thomas Hale. He smiled gently, placing something on the seat between them, a photograph of the burned soldier from the flight. "His name is Corporal Ryan Beckett," the general said, "one of the bravest Marines we've ever known. We lost contact with him for months after an IED explosion in Kandahar. He returned home last month, scarred, quiet, and unsure if this country still had room for him." Julia swallowed. "I didn't do anything special." The general shook his head. "You saw him when others didn't. That day you gave him more than a seat, you gave him dignity, and he hasn't stopped talking about you since." They landed at the White House lawn, where media waited in the distance. Julia, overwhelmed and wide-eyed, was led through side doors, not to meet press, but to attend a private ceremony. In a quiet hall draped with flags and soft light, President Hamilton stepped forward. "Sometimes," he said, "the smallest kindness reminds us of who we are." He turned to Julia. "You reminded us." He handed her a folded American flag and a small box. Inside, a silver medallion etched with the words, "For unseen bravery." But that wasn't all. She was offered a lifetime position on the National Veterans Support Board as a civilian advocate. Her quiet compassion had sparked something far beyond a single moment. It had reignited a national conversation about silent heroes and how small acts can carry unimaginable power. And back home, when Julia stepped off a black SUV onto her quiet street, neighbors clapped. Children waved flags. The same street that once barely knew her name now celebrated her. But she just smiled and whispered, "I didn't do it to be seen. I did it because he deserved to be." And deep in her kitchen drawer, that silver medallion stayed, not as a trophy, but as a promise that kindness never goes unnoticed. Weeks passed, but the memory of that day never faded from Julia's mind. The medallion stayed tucked safely in her drawer, but the meaning of it echoed in every corner of her life. She began volunteering with wounded veterans, quietly showing up at airports with handmade welcome signs, helping families navigate the confusion of homecoming, or simply sitting beside someone who felt invisible. One afternoon, she received a letter in the mail. No return address, just her name, handwritten. Inside was a single note. "You saw me when no one else did. I was more than my scars that day because you reminded me I was still human. Thank you, Julia. I'm living better now because you gave me a reason to believe people still care." Ryan, tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of deep peace. She realized then that the moment on the plane wasn't a small gesture. It was the start of a ripple. One seat, one choice, had helped heal a man broken by war, and that healing had inspired others to act too. At the town hall a month later, they surprised her with a new mural. Julia, smiling, helping a soldier onto a plane. Below it read, "One kind seat can carry a nation." And from that day on, whenever she saw someone struggling in silence, she remembered, the smallest act of kindness can change everything, because you never know who's watching or how far your compassion will travel. Hey everyone, this was Legacy Tales. If this story moved you even a little, share it with someone who believes in silent heroes. And don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that prove one act of kindness can echo forever.